Yes, the Koren Talmud Bavli, with the explanation of Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, all in English, and it's been taking a long time. A daf Gemara, meaning the two sides of the page, it should be done in 1 hour in this context. Somebody could spend a year on a page of Talmud and always get more and more out of it. That's one of the great things about the Talmud, is it's an endless depth, and one can reach the deepest depths from one page of the Talmud, and deepen one's experience tremendously. However, there's another Daf Yomi is bikiyut. It's in order to familiarize ourselves with it, not in depth, but just to review the subjects at hand, and then afterwards, if we have the time, we take, which might be better actually, to just study not Daf Yomi, but to study in depth, and not be concerned about turning the page, because there's, in the words of Rabbi Chaim Bravender, there is a misconception that this next page of Talmud is always going to be more interesting than the page you are already on. However, in the interest of Daf Yomi and time, I'm going to finish up Daf 24, Chaf Dalet, second page, Amud Bet, just by reading the Hebrew and the English translation with no additions whatsoever. Here we go. And I'm going to go fast, folks, so hold on to your seats. Meisivei hamashmiya koloho batfilato Harizei miktane amanaha hamagbiya kolo bitfila Harizei migvi'e hasheker Harizei migvi'e hasheker. The Gemara raises an objection based on a Braita. One who sounds his voice during the Amida prayer is among those of little faith, as he seems to believe that God cannot hear his prayer, which is uttered silently. One who raises his voice during prayer is considered to be among the false prophets. So that's a nun. Minavie sheker. One who raises his voice during the prayer is considered to be among the false prophets, as they too were wont to cry out and shout to their gods, the false prophets of polytheism. Megahek umafahek harizeh migase haruach hamitatesh betfilato siman ralo v'yeshomrim nikar shehu mechoar harak betfilato kilu rak bifnei hamelech. Furthermore, one who belches and yawns while praying is surely among the uncouth. One who sneezes during his prayer, for him it is a bad omen, and some say it is clear that he is repulsive. Also, one who spits during prayer, it is tantamount to spitting in the face of the king. In light of all of this, how could Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, one of the greatest Jews to ever live, one of the greatest rabbis since Moshe, have done all of this while praying? Bishlama magahek mufahek lo kashya kan lo kan lirutzono ela mitatesh kashya. The Gemara explains, granted with regards to one who belches and yawns, it is not difficult. Here, in the case of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi did so, it was involuntary, and therefore permissible. He didn't try to, it just happened. Here, when it is considered uncouth, it is a case where it is deliberate. However, the contradiction between sneezing, in the case where Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi did so, and sneezing, where it is considered a bad omen, is indeed difficult. Amitatesh nami lo kasha. The Gemara responds, the contradiction between sneezing in one case and sneezing in another case is also not difficult. Kan milamala, kan milamata. Here, in the case of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, is referring to sneezing from above, from his nose, and here, where it is a bad omen, is referring from sneezing from below, or flatulence. It was an euphemism. Da'amar Rab Zera ha milta ivla li be Rav Hamnuna. As Rav Zera said in the school of Rav Hamnuna, I absorbed the matter in passing. Ha milte ivlali, be Rav Hamnuna. Ve'utkila li ki kule talmudai. And it is equal in significance to all the rest of my learning. A very simple thing in passing that Rabbi Zera learned in the house of Rav Hamnuna was equal to all of the rest of his learning. Hamitatesh b'dziloto siman yafelo. Kishem she'osim lo nachat ruach milamata, kach osim lo nachat ruach milamala. One who sneezes in the midst of prayer, it is a good omen for him. Just as the sneeze soothes his irritation, giving him pleasure below, it is a sign that there is similarly giving him pleasure above. In other words, sneezing below is not talking about flatulence here. Sneezing below is sneezing in this world from your nose, and sneezing above is in heaven. So just as there's relief below, it's a sign that there's relief in heaven. We all could use some relief in heaven. Ela rak arak kasha. However, the contradiction between spitting in the case where Rabbi Yehuda and HaNasi did so, and spitting where it is deemed tantamount to spitting in the face of the king, is indeed difficult. Rak arak nami lo kasha. No, it's not a difficulty. Efshar k'da Rabbi Yehuda. Damar Rabbi Yehuda hava omed betfilah v'nizdamen lo rok mavli'o betalito v'im talit na'ehu mavli'o ba'apraksuto. The Gemara replies the contradiction between spitting in one case and spitting in the other case is also not difficult, as it is possible to resolve it in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. As Rabbi Yehuda said, one who was standing in prayer and saliva happened to accumulate in his mouth, he absorbs it in his garments. Such as that. The literally says talito, so perhaps like that. The talis, it's a holy object. One would absorb spit in his talis. Go ask your rabbi. So, v'im talit na'ehu mavlio ba'afar sago. But if he has a beautiful a talit was not just a talit, it was also a garment back then. This was like the shirt that we wear today. Back then they wore the talit. So, if he has a beautiful talis and he doesn't want to, get spittle on it, what does he do? If it's a fine garment, he may cover it up with his head covering. That way is permitted to spit. Ravina havakai achorei Ravashi. Ravina was standing behind Ravashi. Nizdemen lo rok p'takeh lachorei. Ravina was standing behind Ravashi during prayer when saliva happened to accumulate in his mouth. So he discharged it behind him. He spat behind himself. Amarle, lo savar lamar lahad Rav Yehuda mavlio ba'afarsakuto. Apraksuto. The mavlio ba'apraksuto. Ravashi said to him, did not the master hold in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Yehuda, who said one absorbs it in his head covering? Amarle, Anna Amina Da'atai. He said to him, I am delicate. Amina Da'atai, I'm delicate, and the mere knowledge that there is spittle in my head covering disturbs my prayer. He couldn't suffer the thought of saliva in his head covering. Mashmiya kolo b'tfiloto harizeh miluktani amana. Amar Rav Huna lo shanu ele sheyachlo lekaven et libo b'lachash, aval en yachlo lekaven et libo b'lachash mutar. V'hane mile b'yachid, aval b'tzibor ate lemitrad tzibora. He was taught in a Braita, one who sounds his voice during his Amida prayer is among those of little faith. Rav Huna said, this was only taught in a case where one is able to focus his heart while praying silently. But if he is unable to focus his heart while praying silently, he is permitted to sound his voice a little bit. This applies to one who is praying alone. If you're praying alone, you can raise your voice a little bit in the Amida prayer in order to increase your intention. If it's difficult for you to silently speak without letting any sound coming out of your mouth, then you can speak in a quiet whisper voice. But when he is praying in a congregation, he will come to disturb the congregation. So you don't raise your voice whatsoever when you're davening with a minyan. during the Amidah prayer. Whisper a little bit, it's not such a big deal. Definitely not to speak in a quiet voice. That's prohibited in a minyan. Rabbi Abba Havaka Mishtamet Mine de Rav Yehuda de Havaka Bae Lemesak La'arad Yisrael de Amar Rav Yehuda Kol Ole Mibavel Eretz Yisrael Over Ba'aseh Shneamar Bavela Yuvau V'Shama Yihu Ad Yom Pakti Otam Ne'um Hashem Amar Izil Ve'Shma Mine Milta Mibet Va'ada V'Hadar Apek. The Gemara relates that Rabbi Abba was avoiding being seen by his teacher Rabbi Yehuda, as Rabbi Abba sought to ascend to Eretz Yisrael. And his teacher disapproved. And Rabbi Yehuda said, anyone who ascends from Babylonia to Eretz Yisrael transgresses a positive commandment. As it is stated, they shall be taken to Babylonia, and there they shall remain until the day that I recall them, said the Lord. In the 27th chapter of Jeremiah. So, they were not today's Zionists. Back then, the sages had decided that it was not time for the prophecy of Jeremiah to be... the prophecy of Jeremiah had not already taken effect, meaning until that day that Jeremiah comes had not yet come. So the verse suggests that one should stay in exile and not move to Israel. Rabbi Abba did not want to discuss his desire to emigrate with Rabbi Yehuda. I can't understand this. Why would anybody not want to go to Israel? Okay, he wants to go, but he can't. Rabbi Yehuda also wanted to go. He couldn't go. He felt, but to feel that when there's a religious obligation not to go, there were times in history after the destruction when we felt we weren't worthy. And the question is, when does the prophecy take effect? Clearly, now it's time to come back to Israel. There's 43% of Jews live outside of Israel. In Israel, 43% of world Jewry lives in Israel. Maybe more, depending on how you count. According to some enumerations, depending on who is a Jew issue, there's over half of world Jewry living in Israel. So it's time to come and make Israel a better place. Enough Zionist commercials. Back to the Gemara. So he didn't want to discuss his desire with Rabbi Yehuda. Poor Rabbi Abba. Nevertheless, he said, I will go and I'll hear something in the hall where the sages assemble without being seen, and afterwards I will leave Babylonia. Azal ashkeche latana dekatani kamed Rabbi Yehuda. He went in Babylon. Rabbi Abba went to the study hall in Babylon, and he found a Tana reciting Tanaitic sources before the study hall, reciting the following Breita before Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda was also there. It says, Haya omed bitfila umitatesh mamtin ad sheyichle haruach v'chozer umitpalel. One who is standing in prayer and sneezed from below, in other words, they broke wind, waits until the odor dissipates and then resumes praying. One is not permitted to intentionally break wind while standing in prayer or in the synagogue, but if it happens, it happens. Ikad Amrei haya omed betfila vikesh litatesh marchik acharav arba amot mitatesh mamtin ad shichle haruach v'chozer mitpalel. One who was standing in prayer when he felt the need to sneeze from below retreats 4 cubits, sneezes, waits until the odor dissipates, and resumes praying. Umamtin ad shichle haruach. And before he resumes praying, he says the following words. Chozer mitpalel ve'eno ve'omer Ribbono shel olam yitzartanu nekavim nekavim chalalim chalalim galui v'yadua lefanecha cherpatenu chlimatenu b'chayenu uv'acharitenu v'rima v'tolea. He doesn't say it out loud like I did. He says it quietly in a whisper, because God's everywhere. You don't have to shout. You can be very quiet and God will hear you. And then after that unpleasant incident had happened, he goes and he continues the prayer of his Amidah. What did he say? What do you pray if, God forbid, you had to pass gas in shul and maybe there was a displeasing odor? there's a special prayer you make. You say, Master of the universe, you have formed us with many orifices and cavities. Our disgrace and shame in life are clear and evident before you. And it is our destiny is with maggots and worms. So we should not be judged harshly. And then you keep praying from where you left off. Amar le ilu lo bati ela lishmo davar ze dai. Rabbi Abba said, if I only came to the study hall that day to hear that word, that was be enough. It would have been worth it to come. Taner Rabbanan haya yeshen betalito ve'enu yechol lahotzi et rosho mipnei hatzina chotzetz betalito et savaro v'koreh kriyat shema v'yesh omrim al libo. The sages taught, one who was sleeping unclothed but was covered with his garments, and he is unable to stick his head out from under the garment because of the cold, may form a barrier with his garments at his neck and recite the Shema in bed, and some say he must form a barrier with his garment at his heart. V'tanakameh, hare libo ro'et ervata, harbe libo ro'et erva, kasavar libo ro'et erva mutar. The Gemara asks, and according to the first Tana, shouldn't he be prohibited from reciting Shema because his heart sees his nakedness, as there's no barrier between them? In other words, he's in bed, he's got his sheet on. In those days, they would sleep in the nude. So he's all covered up, and he says the Shema. Because he's cold, he can't get up, he can't uncover himself, and he can't tie the sheet around his waist to create a barrier so his heart does not see his nakedness. Amar Rav Huda, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Haya Mahalech. So again, the Gemara asks, and according to the first Tana, shouldn't he be prohibited from reciting Shema? Because if he has the sheet around him, he's not making a belt around his waist with the sheet. So as his heart sees his privates. So, and the law is that one can only pray if his heart cannot see his privates. The Gemara responds, indeed, the first Tana holds that when one's heart sees his privates, he is permitted to recite Shema, as a barrier is only necessary to separate between his mouth and his nakedness. So it was enough that it was around his neck, creating the barrier from there. Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Haya Mahalech b'muvuot hamatunafot, maniach yado al piv v'koreh kriyat Shema. Amar le Rav Chisda, Elohim. Im amarali Rabbi Yochanan befume lo tzayetna le. Rav Huna said that Rabbi Yochanan said, one who is walking in an alleyway filthy with human excrement, and it's time for him to say the Shema. He places his hand over his mouth and recites the Shema. Rav Chisda said to him, by God, even if Rabbi Yochanan had said to me directly with his own mouth, I would not have obeyed him. I would have not said Shema in such a place. The Kehilat Yaakov has an interesting take on this whole subject. The difference in approach between Rav Huna and Rav Chisda appears to parallel those that were stated above with regard to their disagreement about prayer in a place of nakedness or filth. According to Rav Huna, cleanliness of the mouth is paramount. As a result, if one's mouth is covered, it is acceptable. Rav Chisda, however, citing the verse, all my bones shall say, prohibits reciting Shema when the body is in a filthy environment. Ikad Amre, Amar Rabba Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, Haya Mahalech b'mavuot hamatunafot, maniach yado al pi v'koreh kriyat Shema. Amar le Rav Chisda, Elohim, im amra li Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi b'fume lo tzayetna le. Some say this halacha in a different version. Rabbi Bar Chana said that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, one who is walking in alleyways filthy with human excrement, and he must recite the Shema, he places his hand over his mouth and recites Shema. Rabbi Chisda said to him, by God, even if Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said it to me directly with his own mouth, I would have not obeyed him. Umi amar Rav Huna hachi? V'hamar Rav Huna, Talmid chacham asor lo la'amod b'makom atinofet. Lefi she'i efshar lo la'amod b'li hirhor Torah. Lo kasha, kan ba'omed, kan ba'mahalech. The Gemara challenges this. Did Rav Huna really say that? Didn't Rav Huna say a Torah scholar is prohibited from standing in a place of filth, as he is unable to stand without contemplating Torah? People who learn Torah, they're always thinking about Torah. From childhood, they're trained to. They love it. It's in their kishkis. It's in their soul. Some people in Jerusalem, you see them walking down the street with a book, without a book. Their minds are on holy Torah matters. It's amazing. Come and be one of them. So uttering Shema orally is graver than mere contemplation. The Gemara responds, it's not a difficulty. Rav Huna prohibited contemplating the Torah in a case where one is standing in a place of filth. While here, Rav Huna permitted reciting Shema in a case where one is walking through a place of filth. So apparently, according to Rav Huna, you can't stand in a dirty alleyway that smells and perhaps somebody used it as a bathroom and say Shema. But if you happen to be walking through and it's time for Shema and there's no other way to go and you absolutely have to go that way, then you go and you could say the Shema while walking. Umi amar Rabbi Yochanan hachi, v'hamar Rabbi Barakhot, amar Rabbi Yochanan, mikol makom mutar leherher b'divrei Torah chutz mibet hamerchatz, mibet hakiseh, v'kitema hachi nami, kan be'omed v'kan be'malech. Ini, v'har Rabbi Abahu hava ka azil b'trei Rabbi Yochanan, v'hava ka karik rechma, v'kimata b'muvot tunafot ishtik. Amar le Rabbi Yochanan lehechan hadar, amar le Im shahita kedei ligmor et kula chozer l'rosh. Did Rabbi Yochanan really say that? Didn't Rabbi Barakhot say that Rabbi Yochanan said it this way? One is permitted to contemplate matters of Torah everywhere except in the bathroom and the bathhouse? Consequently, it is prohibited even to contemplate the Torah in a place of filth. Like the law today. Today the law is you may not think about Torah in the bathroom or in the bathhouse. The changing room of the mikveh, a few words here and there, as long as you're not saying it in front of anybody who's undressed. But the best thing to do is to be careful is just to not speak in the mikveh. Somebody wants to speak a little bit, it's not such a problem. Somebody's going on blabbing the whole time, Okay, the Hasidim, they like to sit in the mikveh and blab a lot about the daily news. Who knows? I'm not going to judge them. There's some Hasidim who are very holy, would never even open their mouth all day, not even in the mikveh. Okay, so, not knocking anybody. And if you say here too, there is a distinction between two cases. Here, Rabbi Yochanan prohibited contemplating the Torah in a case where one is standing. Here, Rabbi Yochanan permitted to recite the Shema in a case where one is walking. Is that so? Wasn't Rabbi Abahu walking after Rabbi Yochanan and reciting Shema? And when he reached the filthy alleyway, he fell silent and stopped reciting Shema? When they emerged, Rabbi Abahu said to Rabbi Yochanan, "To where in Shema should I return when I go back to recite it?" Rabbi Yochanan said to him, "If you delayed continuing Shema for an interval long enough to complete the whole Shema and say it to the end, go back to the beginning and recite it from there." Hachi kamarle, lididi, lo severely, lididach, disvirlach, im shahita kedei ligmor et kula chozer l'rosh. The Gemara responds, it's not a proof. It's not a proof, as he says to him as follows, I do not hold that one must interrupt the recitation of Shema in this case, but for you, who holds that one must, I don't hold that you interrupt the recitation of Shema in this case, walking through the dirty alleyway. But you, who hold that you must, if you delayed the Shema for an interval long enough to complete the entire Shema, then you have to start back at the beginning. And here we are going to pause until next time. Shalom uvracha.